I know that the limitations of design tools can lead to bad designs. And I see it over and over. Some designers struggle to 3D model what they actually had in mind. And then they end up with something which is just half as good as they actually imagined. Now, this chair was entirely modeled with the SubD tools. It's not a masterpiece, but it shows that not everything is as easy to model with NURBS than they would be with SubD tools. And I'm not saying the SubD tools are the answer to everything, but it's really cool that we now have mesh modeling, SubD modeling and NURBS, plus we have parametric tools within Grasshopper for all of these 3 modes, which is quite amazing. So I was thinking, how can I show SubD modeling with a relatively simple yet complex model if you think of it as a NURBS model? Most designers actually never touch these tools in Rhino. But once you've tried it, you realize it's actually not that difficult, and it's hard to get away from it. It's hard to not use it. But it's up to you. You choose. I think designing a chair is a really cool exercise, and many artists, designers, architects have done their famous chair. From Zaha did, to Thomas Hedderwick, to Gary. They all did their version of a chair. So what I would do first is definitely try to create a mood board of chairs you like. And it's not about copying somebody's chair, but get a feeling of what is out there. That should be the first task. You can use a mirror board, or you just sketch it into your notebook. Think of the ribbon chair, or the tongue chair, the big easy chair by Ron Arad, or the loop chair, or the boa sofa. Now, sketching. Sketching is one of the most underrated skills. If you can sketch, that is sometimes better than 3D modeling. I swear. But especially for this exercise, I really encourage you to sketch your design. Sketch your design first, because sketching will allow you to already think on how you model it. And for this exercise in particular, we will need the sketches to bring into Rhino. So I will show you how I would do this, and then we bring this into Rhino. We will start with easy exercises on how we could start modeling this. So before we can really jump into 3D modeling, we need to sketch it first. That is key. Otherwise, you will struggle later on. So I'm using Photoshop for this, but you can use any other drawing tool you want. So what I would do first, well, let's draw a horizon or a ground, I would say. We need that later in Rhino, so don't miss out at this point. Just creating a straight line, choosing my weapon here, just a hard round. It's my favorite pen. That's it. Now, what I also want to do here is to think about the size of my chair. What we try to end up with is a front view of the chair, a side view of the chair, and a 3/4 view of the chair. Yeah, this is not very good, but I think you know what I mean. We want to start with ground, and we want to understand the size. So I'll place here my 0 point, and for a lounge chair, the seating height would be around 35 centimeters. So I'm creating another line here, and the top of the chair would be around 600 or 60 centimeters. So if we have this, we can remove guidelines. I'm gonna make this a bit slightly faded here. I create a center line, and I will lock this layer. Now I will sketch on top of it, and you can do this of course on paper if you want, and then scan it in, or into your notebook and scan it in, or on your iPad. It's really up to you. No hard feelings here. You can use whatever you want. Now for the sitting width, I would say it should be comfortable. So I would make it at least the width as the height. So if this is 35, not 35, sorry, almost twice. I want to make it twice as wide. So roughly that size I think is good. That's the width of my chair. And this is the backrest, the top of the backrest. Now, as you've seen, it's quite a futuristic chair. It goes somehow like this with the armrest coming down here. So I'm just very roughly sketch it out. This is my sitting. I have these holes in there, and the back. It's probably not a good idea for a chair to have just 3 legs, but hey, this is if we're just designing things, and then later we figure out actually it's not a good idea, but I think it looks interesting, so let's just try it out. And you can draw something else if you want, but make sure it's not too simple. Now, if I draw this on the side angle, I could, if I draw this in the side view, I should also think about, of course, what's the depth of my seat. That should be around 40, at least 40 centimeters, 50 centimeters, something like that. So it's a very rough sketch. And then from the side, this probably looks a bit like this. And maybe it needs to be a bit higher in the back. But yeah, just sketch it very rough. Now I will make this very fainted, and I'll sketch over again. This time I try to be a bit more cautious. Yeah, getting there. And I try to make sure that the heights, that they are aligned here. And especially now, because this is symmetric, I also try to make this, of course, as symmetric as possible. So these heights should all align. I like to have this a bit of a kink here, would be here, and the armrest comes all the way down. Sometimes I need an extra line. By the way, this rotated view is not as important, but it just helps a bit to understand what we're trying to achieve. Still not really nice, but let's normally sketch over several times just to make sure it really shows what I'm trying to do. I do another take. The more you know, the more you spend time on your sketch, the more you figure out within the sketch, the better. I think I can live with this, but what I will do is I will just maybe add a bit of a color here. Not color, but some shading. Doesn't have to be perfect, but sometimes that actually helps to see that there are portions where it just doesn't work. Like for example, these openings are actually they're not very symmetrical. So I could go over here and sketch over again. Also, I miss the opening on that side to really dig out the shadows a bit. Yeah, I sketched over the line work. It doesn't matter. All right, so I think this is good enough for me. We could of course spend more time on it, but it gives me a bit of an idea on how the shape should be. And I can just save this as a JPEG, and we are ready to go. So this was a bit of a different version. We'll make something very similar. All right, let's create a new file. Start with the right size. I would say it's either small objects in centimeters or large objects in centimeters. Doesn't really matter. Let's choose large objects in centimeters. Now, before we really jump into modeling the chair, we still need to understand a bit about SubD. So if I go here, I would just create a very simple object first, so you get a quick understanding. Now, I changed my viewport settings a bit. So the normal render settings would be like this, and my beautified version is this one. This is what I normally use, and we will modify this a bit, because what I don't like is that the ground plane is moving along. So we could change here the ground plane, and we make it in a way that it's not moving. Just put here 0. That's it. Now my object it can fly basically if I wanted to. That's my beautified display, and I normally create a nice material for it, so it feels a bit more interesting. So we just go into the material settings, click custom, and here we can of course change the color, whatever color you want, and I put a bit of a gloss finish. It's just nicer. Oh yeah, and we need the sunlight. Put here manual, a bit of reflectivity. Maybe I make this just black, it's easier. And I think that's good. Yeah, we can change that whenever we want. But if if you would like to work with a similar viewport setting, then head over to my previous video. I'll put the links in the show notes so you can check it out, where you can learn how I did this beautified viewport mode. So that's my viewport mode. Now I will jump between the normal shaded, ghosted, and my beautified display, depending on what I need at the moment. But before we jump into model our chair, let's examine a bit what the SubD tools are, like just so you get the basics. Standard toolbar is here, SubD toolbar is here. There's a few things to understand. I jump back here into shaded viewport because it's easier. I have my grid here. You have all these tools, but you can remove creases. We will learn about creases a lot. We can expand edges. We can bevel meshes and SubDs. So there's not just SubD tools in here, but also mesh tools. We can create soft creases and hard creases. We can add edge loops. We will do a lot. There are some other tools. I just point out the most important we will use in this first course. A pen surface we will use a lot. We will use probably the SubD inset SubD edges. We will use the stitch function, the mesh or SubD bridge. I will explain probably a bit about SubD, because what this means is subdivision. Very quickly, we can spin edges. We might use a bit. We also will probably use the slide SubD edges, and very important because it's a symmetric model, we will use the reflect object tool here. We will also use extrude, and then we have some tools which are about how to select things within the SubD tools. Now, there's a few things which I feel they're not yet 100% developed, like it's how things are selected, that sometimes could cause a bit of confusion. There are some other tools in here which creates objects, like for example, a SubD box, a SubD plane. So we could, for example, create a plane that has a certain faces. This is like a plane with 2 divisions. So we have 4 faces, really. If I compared it with a single face SubD, that would be like this. And then there's another very important tool. We will not use much in here, but what we look at is soft transform and toggle soft transform. That's very important. And also very important for SubD modeling is the gumball view. And when you right press, we can change on how we modify things, move things around based on how that is aligned to either the C-plane object of world or the view. So these are very important. The other thing here, you can see we have 2 different ways of selecting things. We can have the object snap, but we also have a filter which filters certain things. That's very key for SubD modeling. If you don't understand this, you will struggle, but it's super easy. There is a way to either select points, and there's ways to select edges, and there's ways to select surfaces, and you can see whatever I click here, I can then select. Or you can say I want to be able to select all of these at the same time, or I want to be able to select points, curves, surface edges, faces, and SubDs. I can select the whole thing if I want. If this is not on, I can only select whatever is basically marked here. That can be overwritten. If I click here, for example, now the edges are on. If I click here, the surfaces are on. If I click here, the points are on. Or I can turn this off. Now it's all disabled, and I can actually select. That's really key to understand, because sometimes if you're not sure how to select things, so for example now I want to select my points but I don't know how to do this. Here it's all marked. That's a bit confusing. I think there's some things developers need to think about, but I can just go here and then I can select points. Now that's pretty much it in terms of how it works, and we will learn all the rest very, very soon. Now before we jump into the modeling the chair, now we need to bring in our sketch. Create a new folder here, a new layer, sketch, make this active, and now I can bring in a picture picture, and you can see I did another version in the past. Let's use my new version here, and I can place that wherever. Maybe I can put on the grid snap, and when placing it out, I'm already thinking about the size. So because we are in centimeters, I could, you know, crank this up. I mean, you can always scale it later anyway, but I feel like it's a better practice if you start already correctly. So we said this is around 60 to 70 centimeters tall. We said that the seat is around 35. So this would be around that what we had in mind before. Actually something like this. So that's the size we're looking at. So I can see that on the line here and here. So we have almost 40, which is quite ideal. I think this is perfect. So now, as you can see now, I cannot really touch this. This is because of we are in this SubD selection mode. So I would go here. Now I can select my image. I can, with the gumball, I go here. It's currently on view. That's not what I want at the moment. It's only in certain situations I want to have this on view. I actually want to have this on C-plane, and I turn it on. Oops. And I will turn it on. All right. So now I can just rotate this along the x-axis and put here 90, and it's already there. Now what I also want to do is to change my viewport. Normally I always like to work in perspective mode, but for SubD modeling, especially when we have this setup, I like to work with a layout of 3 viewports. So this is my view. This is what I want. I go here and press. This is gonna be my front, and this is gonna be my right side, or from left, I think. Now I want to place this up here, so my ground aligns with this x-axis. Doesn't have to be 100%. But yeah, the more exact you are, the better. Now I want to cut this. I want to actually cut this in pieces, a bit here and here. Don't worry if it's overlapping. You can always maybe adjust you adjust your image and move objects a bit in Photoshop. But I like to trim this in 3 images, and here we put perspective view 90 degrees, and we are aligned this so it aligns with the center here, with the Z axis here, like this. And because I didn't draw it perfectly, it's slightly off center, but I think that's good enough. Now I also want to push this back, so it should be aligned with the floor, with the ground, and it should be slightly pushed back, so it doesn't disturb me when modeling. So this is the first setup. And then here I realize I want to have this from the right side. It doesn't actually matter, but I don't know, I feel that's how I would like to set it up. And I push this to the middle, or you could set the front edge of the chair to the Z axis here. That's also a possibility. Or you place it here like this into the center. But basically these both images now align to the height. And then I can, if I want, I could rotate it by 45 degrees and place it here in the back. So I can also look at my chair from this angle. So now we are here, right? So we have this set up. I will lock this so we cannot touch it and move it. So we're finally ready to start. And we'll just do a very simple exercise to start with this and explain a bit on how we go about modeling this. It's good here to start probably in the front, because this is a symmetric object. We only want to model one side. We don't want to model 2 sides. We just model the right side, and the left side is automatically generated. So let's go into the SubD, and we have this option here, reflects SubD object. I would normally start with creating one single SubD surface. Now you think, like, why would you do that? Yes, so there's many ways on how you could use SubD, but that's one way, and I like it because I already have my sketch. I basically can start with this, and I don't need to block it out. I don't need to block out my my object. So I created this first, oh sorry, that was not what I want. I create this first SubD face, 10 by 10. Now you think like, oh wow, but it's round, it's not straight, but it's also not a circle. So actually you can see that there are 4 points. All right, now if I click points, I can now select points, and I can see, okay, there seems to be 4 points, and it's not a real circle. With tab, you can switch between hard display and a soft display. This is really interesting because it's not really shown anywhere, but this is a very important aspect of SubD modeling. You want to be able to switch between the both modes, the hard display and the interpolated version of it. You can also display the control points or the curve edit points here by just selecting it, and then you have your curve edit points or your control points. And this is annoying. Yeah. So you could also show this in this way. So your surface is actually like an interpolated version of the straight version or the hard edge version. Okay, I drew this right at the center, next to the center. I didn't draw it like this. I drew it exactly like this. So it aligns with this green C axis or Z axis, if you want. And what that helps me to do is to avoid moving things around. So now I can reflect this by just creating an axis here and say reflect. Now I have an object. If I change the point, for example, I move this, you can see it does the same on the other side. It mirrors exactly what I'm doing on one side, and that will help us to generate our model. Now I can take this whole face because it's just one face anyway, and I can move it down here. I move it exactly to my chair front, I don't know, seat nose, or I don't know if that's how it's called, or the front seat portion. And now I can move that exactly to the spot I want this in my right viewport and my front viewport. So you can see it moves up and down, but if I move it like this, it doesn't move here because it's the other viewport. And of course we can see it exactly here where it is in the perspective. I can go here into the beauty, in my beauty display, and I can keep here the normal shaded viewport. One thing to say, you might want to make your drawing or sketch transparent. That we should do that actually. So we can select everything. It's a bit annoying that we have to disable here. We can select everything and we can change our material because it's basically a plane with material on it, and we can change the object transparency. That helps a bit to avoid confusion. All right, so that's good. And now I can close this again and we're ready to go. So we'll just create one loop as a first exercise. By loop, I mean I want to create a loop of faces around this axis of this chair. So it basically goes from here in the front, on the seat, back and up, and all the way down here and underneath and back. This is the first loop I want to generate, and we'll do that now. So you get a very clear understanding of what we are trying to achieve. How to do that? How can we start with this? So there's a way to extrude things. So we can extrude faces and we can extrude edges. In that case, I want to extrude edges. Now currently, so I can select here edges. I can select one single edge of that and extrude it with this tool here. And you can change here the direction, but what is more convenient, so I clicked here escape. What is more convenient, if I select this, I can actually extrude it directly out of here without calling a command. I can just, or pressing here, I can just click here this ball and it extrudes my edge, right? So I go back because I want to be more specific here. So you can see that I can extrude it, but I want to extrude it like this, all the way back. And then I can shift it just where I want this to be. And basically I want to align it with this edge here on the top. And I'm gonna move this up. This is my first extrusion. And I'll keep this as it is. So this aligns just with the edge here. Not perfectly yet, but we will fix that. And we can now create a edge loop. It's basically a subdivision of this. We divide this long face into two, and we can do that by either now clicking directly on it with left mouse click. For that you need to have this edge here selected, or what I kind of prefer, because this is how I learned it a bit from Blender, it is more similar to the Blender method, but it's up to you. You can right click here and then select the edge perpendicular to the edge you want to create, right? So, and then you can set it into the middle. It snaps to the middle because we have mid on here in the snapping. So with this now, I can push it wherever I want onto the seat, and I can try to, so now it's kind of aligns, but when you think about it, this is not easy, this is not really comfortable to sit. So we want to make another edge loop here, probably. First of all, we want to push this a bit down. This would be much more realistic, and maybe our seat here, maybe how we drew it is not entirely correct. But that would be the first start. We can probably push that up a bit, you know. If you can see that it's actually moving everything, but we need to be careful because we didn't move the inner edge now. So I go back and I'm gonna choose both here and make this a bit higher. So that feels a bit better. Now I can do the same again. So I can take this and and create an extrusion of this. It's not ideal. It's not really the shape I have, but we'll fix that. So we can now move this a bit back because it didn't really align anymore. Probably want to also push this a bit down, and we can do the same again here. We can push this all the way back, push it down, and create an edge loop, and we push this up and probably back. So we can again, well, now I want to explain something very important. We can create greases. Now you can see it's all rounded here as filleted edges basically. I can turn this off locally. I can actually select points and make them greases. I can do that by clicking here on the right, add a hard crease to SubD or mesh. And now this has snapped down to the floor because that's where we pushed it before. We pushed it exactly here. If I now select my edge and I want to extrude it again, you see it stays flat. That's exactly what we want in that case. There are, by the way, other ways to model this hard edges by creating a bevel or creating additional edge loops which get pushed to the corner, and that makes it more a more realistic version. But in this video we'll just use this method. Now I can do the same here. Maybe I want to basically flatten this here as well. So I choose my points, and I only need to choose one really. Basically this middle one and this on the side, and then I can just create this seam or this hard crease. And I probably want to do the same with this edge here too. So I could create here, select this edge and create a seam. Now you can see how this is aligned. It just seems like doesn't fit anymore. But we can take this and push it back, and we can take this outer edge here and push it down. And we will work on this a bit more later on. Now, what we could use in order to close this, we could use the bridge function. Bridge meshes or SubDs. We can select, and it asks us, so we select one edge, select first a set of edges. So you can select more than one edge, but you need to select the first set, and then you enter and you select the second one. And we lost our crease, but we can get it back by just saying here crease, and that creates our backside. Okay, and with that I can again create an edge loop. No, that's not what I want. It's not what I want. I like this right click. It's a bit confusing for me because coming from a different software with the SubD modeling, but you will figure it out over time. Now with this I can just push back here so it fits roughly onto my model, and we will make this a bit less, bring this up slightly. And I want to also have a hard edge on the underside here, so I will make this edge here also a hard edge. All right, that looks promising, and maybe I just draw it. So in the next video we will continue by creating more loops and creating a framework which we then just need to fill in later on. So we'll create a loop which goes like this, and then we create another one which basically goes from here all the way down like this. We will create a loop which goes in the back and comes all the way to the back of to this back foot. And then when we have this, we start to fill in the blanks. So we basically create a framework which we just need to fill in later. And we'll learn much more about mesh and the topology of a mesh model. Sorry, SubD model. Don't forget to save, very important. In the next episode, we continue with our framework of the chair and we start to fill in the areas. Now, just make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. And if you would like to support my channel, please check out my channel membership and buy me a coffee. See you in the next video.